So today we're going to talk a little bit about small farms and how they're really adapting during the COVID-19 pandemic and the crisis right leading up to it when we were starting to see those changes. Maybe, there we go. Okay, it's a little slow. I was saying at the beginning that the bandwidth in our neighborhood is a little over saturated, so my screen may be a little slow to go through the slide deck, so I apologize for that. So we're going to talk about what essential businesses are. I'm going to give you an example of a small farm, which happens to be our small farm, and the changes that we've seen through COVID, how we've pivoted, and give you some tips and tricks on how to help other farms pivot when they come to you. Then we're going to talk about resources for small business in general. So any of the small businesses that you're helping, agribusiness specifically, and also mental health. We'll go over some questions at the end too. And then at the to follow up on this presentation, I'll actually send you a PDF with all the links that we talked about, so you don't have to worry about trying to write them down. Before we go into essential business though, we have a small enough group right now. I'd like to know a little bit more about who's on the call and what your scope is related to working with farms, if you've worked with them in the past, and where your location is. So maybe I'll just run down the list of the attendees and you can give me a little introduction about yourself and where you're at. So can we start with Nancy?
Sure. Hi, Stephanie, and thank you for this topic. I am a founding director of a community economic development nonprofit in far Northern California, opposite end of the state from you. Danny and I refer to each other as bookends to the state in our efforts. We do a number of different entrepreneurial training activities and programs to support our communities. Including a women's business center, which most of our entrepreneurial training goes through. And that covers the 4 counties in the top part of the state. And then also a farmer's market, the most successful up here in Siskiyou County and has been around for 21 years. So, and seeing lots of changes this year as we launch on May 18th. And then also a VITA program. So my interest here today is just thinking about what else we can provide to our vendors at the market and how else we can be sensitive to what they're going through and also bring resources wherever possible.
Fantastic.
And small scale ag.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Nancy. It's great to have you.
Yeah.
Kathy, let's hear a little bit from you. You're still on mute, Kathy, if you're there. If not, we can come back. Okay, we'll jump back. How about Hannah? Or Candida Hayes? Nope. Okay.
Also, if it helps for everybody to know, you probably already know this, but just as a refresher, in your bottom left-hand corner, there's a microphone, and there might be a, if there's a line going through it, just click on it, and that will unmute yourself, and then you can talk, and when you're done, you can mute yourself again. And I see Candida is in the group chat just saying it's just going to take her a second to unmute herself, and then she'll be able to share. So thanks, Candida.
Fantastic.
And we have a couple more people joining.
Hi. So I'm doing this from a tablet, so it takes me a minute to kind of get used to the interface. I'm actually here more as a consumer. I live in a co-op, and I also have been working with small businesses in Oakland. Right now, I'm particularly concerned about restaurants. You know, small mom and pop shops. And I've heard that a lot of, or not a lot, but some small farms are able to set up CSA type arrangements with individuals. So as a person who lives in a co-living house with 10 people right now, and then a larger community, of co-living houses. I'm wondering if there are ways that we can work with small farms as consumers and support those small business or farms as small businesses that way.
Right. Well, awesome. Thank you, Candida. We'll cover some of that towards the end. And then if we have time, I'll just go into a little bit of deeper dive on kind of the how consumer can support small farms and how that relationship is changing with COVID, but is still very much there. So thank you for bringing that up. How about Kathy? You're still on mute, Kathy. I can see your mouth moving, but not hear you.
There you go.
There you go.
Hi, Kathy Chair. I'm with Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, in short FDIC. I am the Community Affairs Specialist for San Diego. And I am new to the geography, so I am here to learn, basically what you're doing out there, and if there's anything FDIC can contribute to help out, I'd like to know about it.
Fantastic, thank you. Hannah?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So my name is Hannah Lean, and I am a program manager with DMC Community Capital. And we are a nonprofit microlender that provides capital to small businesses with an emphasis on women-owned businesses and really trying to reach businesses that aren't able to access capital in traditional methods. And so my interest here today is just to kind of learn a little bit more about the needs of our small farms and rural partners out there and see how we can be an assistance during this time to those businesses.
Fantastic, thank you. We have somebody on the phone, a 703 number, but they don't have a name.
Sorry, that's me. I didn't have a microphone.
Oh, perfect. Okay, no problem, Kathy. Thank you. All right, Emily, did I get everybody?
Let's see. I think so. Yes, I believe so.
Perfect. Awesome. Again, thank you all so much for coming. We'll talk a little bit more about me in the coming slides, but first and foremost, let's talk about the concept of essential businesses, especially now with COVID-19, whether or not we can be open, although in the last couple of days, we've started to see the kind of the opening of the doors for business. The last couple of weeks, we have not. It was down to core essential businesses. Those are defined, although we hear a lot of it being talked about locally by our governors and by the mayors, as well as more globally by the president. The essential business list actually comes from the Department of Homeland Security, and it identifies industries and sub-industries and their criticality to the infrastructure of the United States. Farms are under the food and agriculture industry, which is of course fantastic. We're glad that we're properly categorized, because as we've seen in this situation, not all parts of our industry were properly categorized. So what that means is that a farm can remain open, still providing their produce to either restaurants or the consumer, however they did it before, as long as they are truly a farm. And the reason I say this is because there's in San Diego is a great example of it, and each county is a little bit different on what terms they use. But in San Diego, you can be licensed as a farm, so that constitutes you as a certified producer at the county level, but you can also, especially in the urban farm environment, be a community food producer, which is just as important. It's just as important to provide food to the community. It's just as important to provide food to schools. But unfortunately, it doesn't meet the agriculture industry category for essential businesses. So what that means is that you could be a community food producer. You could have decided to get that license with the county. But when it comes to being able to get some of the benefits that were released, PPP or the economic disaster loans, you couldn't get those because you weren't considered an essential business, or you may not have been able to get them. So the first and foremost, when you're working with farms, specifically with some of the farm resources we're going to talk about later, we want to make sure that they're truly categorized as a farm. So that means that they're a licensed farm. They could have employees or could not have employees. They may also have, depending on their size, H2A and H2B workers. And those are farm workers that are licensed to come into the country to work specifically on a farm. They have very specific benefits and guarantees with their contract to be able to do that. Does that make sense for anybody? Feel free, we have a small group, to go ahead and speak up if you have a question, and we can address them as we go along. Okay, so speaking a little bit about that registration and permits, there's a ton of different permits for agriculture, as most anybody that's worked in agriculture knows. It's a highly regulated industry. At the top level, it's at the federal level, which is an FSA. So that would be your farm registration. Then we go down to the state level, which covers things like CSAs or community supported agriculture. Candida, you mentioned that a little bit. That's also where we do our egg safety and quality management registration. And then down at the county level here in San Diego, they're called a certified producer permit. That's pretty standard across California. Then you have to have additional licenses like pesticide and scale, but that's not the part that I'm really worried about. The area that we have to make sure that that your clients are able to get some of the benefits we're going to talk about are at this county and state level. If they're big enough to be a farm registered with the FSA, that's fantastic, but the county and state is really where a lot of these benefits are going to come from. Then, as I mentioned, in San Diego, we also have community food producer and culinary garden or regulated food facility. So that would be something like a restaurant that has its own small farm. So as long as the people or the farms that you're working with have one of these, they should be able to meet all the agricultural requirements for those resources and benefits. So let's talk a little bit about a farm and kind of how this plays into the whole structure of resources and benefits related to COVID-19. So we're going to talk a little bit about my farm. And I say that as I'm looking out. It's a beautiful day down here in San Diego, watching the wind blow into the farm and having a little bit of a recollection of, oh my gosh, how did we get here? So we're a small farm in National City that's a little bit south of downtown San Diego. We're an urban farm. We're on just shy of an acre. So the premise of our farm is that we provide real food and authentic experiences. So we use completely historic methods. We do everything by hand. Everything we grow is heirloom. This is us pre-pandemic. This is pre-pandemic when we bought the property. So you can see we started from pretty much a weeded backyard with a lot of ice plants. And then we converted it over into a working farm, event center, historic workshop space. So pre-COVID, we're 100% veteran owned, certified organic. We only grow heirloom fruits, vegetables, and herbs. So that means we have varietals from as early as the year 700 to just before, well, it's like the early 1900s. So just before World War II, when a lot of the hybridization started occurring. We're a historically registered property. We're residentially zoned. So we're a commercial farm, licensed all the way up to the federal level, but we are in a residentially zoned area. Our property is 3/4 of an acre, so just shy of an acre. We started our first seeds in 2014 and had our first sale in 2016. Pre-COVID, had 1/4 of an acre of actual growing space with additional expansion into a food forest and dye plants planned. We actually have all the plot plans in place right now, and we had to cancel a lot of our orders for our trees that we were going to put in. Our house area is another 1/4 of an acre. We had monthly classes, quarterly dinners, had a large holiday market with multiple vendors, and then also rented our space for private events. Our mercantile or our on-farm store is a 120 square foot store. We were open 3 days a week. We also had an online store with farm pickup We did a weekly farmers market, and we sold to restaurants and makers for wholesale. So our business structure pre-COVID, husband and wife, sole proprietor. We had 2.25 employees. So that was myself full-time, farmhand 3/4 time, my husband and father as infrastructure support, about 1/4 time. They both still work off farm. Our production was about 100 pounds a week on average, and we sold 40 weeks a year. So during COVID, and this changed very, very quickly. We were at a farmer's market the Wednesday 11th. And then Thursday we were out doing our pandemic shopping. It's the most grocery store shopping I've ever done in my life. Packing up, and by Friday we were completely changing our business. So we took our 1/4 acre space. We postponed our dye plants and food forests. We expanded out to a 1/4 acre into our other parts of the farm that we knew we were going to plant to. So they were available, but we hadn't planted. We were going to use those for food forest items. So those are things that are kind of long-term, longer, slower growing. And we converted pretty quickly to get more seasonal crops in the ground, and making sure that all the herbs that we were spending our energy on were stuff that were quick growing and that would actually feed people, versus going into that kind of, we have a lot of unique herbs. So we have things like wormwood and valerian root, but we were really focusing more on cilantro, which grows very quick, or basil, or things that we could actually grow quick and get out to people so they were feeding. We went from having things that take up to 3 months to grow, like potatoes, really focusing our energy on carrots and beets and radishes, because we can get those out within about 1.5 months. So completely changed our focus there. We canceled all of our events. It ended up in about a $7,000 hit to us over the course of April and the beginning of May. And then as it went on, we actually canceled our June events as well. We closed our farm store and restricted all public access to the farm. Our concern there was we didn't know how much, at that point, they didn't know how quickly COVID would spread, or if it would spread from person to food or food to person. We wanted to make sure that we were protecting the food system by closing it down to public access. We took our online store from farm pickup to doorstep, no contact delivery. We walked away from our farmers markets, and most of our wholesale accounts stopped buying from every farm in the area. They closed their doors or went to extremely limited hours. That's been going on for next week. It'll be a month. So our business structure, of course, we're still a husband and wife sole proprietor. I went down to 3/4 time, which seems a little strange as far as during a time when something like this would happen. Why wouldn't I stay full-time in my business? I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We also, oddly enough, increased our labor. You can see from here, we went from 3/4 time farmhand. So we have 2 part-time farmhands now. My father, we took completely out of the mix. He's 75, and it was a potential concern if we had him moving between properties for his own health. So we took him completely out of the mix. And then my husband, his focus is, right now we're not doing any infrastructure that we had planned. We're doing minimal additional labor. Our sole goal is to grow food. And my husband helps with delivery. We do 100% of the delivery, my husband and I. Our thought process is that if we're going to put people in danger, we'd rather put ourselves as the business owners versus our employees. So we took that over. Our production increased about a week later, just because of how the things that we had getting ready to plant that we were going to do as seedlings and sell them. We were able to get them in the ground really quickly, and we stopped letting things go to seed. We just were taking them as food. So our production right now is, depending on the week, between 250 and 300 pounds a week. And we're not containing our sales to 40 weeks a year. Typically we would have 2 periods of off time to let the ground recover and us do some infrastructure work. Right now, we're not going to make that decision as a farm. We're just going to keep on producing until we feel that the community and the industry is stable enough that we can personally take a break of producing food for our community. So we don't want to guarantee that we're going to stay at 40 weeks this year. Specifically about me and my time. In the beginning of this, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if small farms of our size were going to be able to stay open. We didn't know if people would be afraid to buy local food and if they would only want to buy kind of prepackaged or plastic covered food. So I had an opportunity, oddly enough, I got asked to take a medical device project in Europe as a consulting project, because that's what I used to do before I farmed. And I had told them no. And a week later, I went back and said, if you still need somebody, I'll help you. And the reason for that was making sure that I have income to keep our one employee still employed, that I didn't have to lay her off, and that we could still keep money coming into the farm, because whether or not we sell the food, the farm still costs money, right? So money still has to be spent on water. We still have to put seeds. We still have to, fertilize and take care of the land. So there's still costs about running a farm, even if we're not selling food. And I wanted to make sure that we could stay having income coming in and keep the farm open, even if we weren't selling food for a period of time during the pandemic. So now that we've been doing this just shy of a month and a lot of long days thinking about what's next, we've started to talk about what the new normal is. So I'm sorry, for some reason that actually got me a little choked up. So we've looked at everything that we have in our space, and we had a few years ago bought another 2.5 acres close to us, about a mile away, that we're turning the soil on. So we have about another probably one season before we can plant, that we've taken it from hard pan dirt into usable soil. So looking at what does it mean now? So we built a place where people could gather, and that was a lot of our business, was the gathering either on our space or at restaurants and these wholesale consumers of ours, of bringing people together. Not thinking about what happens when you build a business that has a key component that is about that gathering, and that is a significant revenue generator. What happens when that can't occur? So taking everything that we've learned and continue to learn about this, looking at what do we do moving forward to make sure that we're a stable business, that we're protecting the food that we're growing, we're protecting us, we live on farm, and we're protecting our employees and our community. So we've decided that we'll stay at the 1/2 acre of growing space, that we will put in the food forest, because that's a lot of perennial plants that will provide food continuously. We're going to increase our fruit tree production, again, having long-term kind of hope for the future, continuous production of food, and we'll increase our seasonal crop production. So we're really looking now at any place that maybe it was only a pollinator garden. Can we switch that pollinator garden from edible flowers to potatoes that take the same amount of time in the ground as something like an edible flower, but are providing a more substantive edible crop for the community. So we're really looking at how we can use each bit of the space the most productively for our community and for us as a business, because the more we have to sell, we can sell for the people that are willing to buy from us and the restaurants when they reopen. And whatever we can't sell, we can feed ourselves, our employees, and our community. For the house part of our business, our event space, from a scheduled event space, we're turning it into an ad hoc event space. We still expect to have at least one dinner. We feel really strongly about the ability to gather as a family and as a community. We're a military family generationally, and we've spent a lot of meals not together. So we feel like that's still really important. We expect to still have our holiday market, and we may rent our space to holiday or to private events, but we won't have monthly events anymore. And all of these are still kind of in that maybe phase. It's definitely this ad hoc versus us designing the whole space around having those events. We've decided we are not going to go back to farmers markets. We will stay having our online store with delivery, and we may have the open air farm stands versus our farm store, just an open air farm stand open just for events. So we're reducing what we had and kind of keeping some of the things like our online store that we've learned. Our business structure, of course, hasn't changed. I will most likely stay at 3/4 time. We feel like there's a value of having, as much as there's reducing risk by diversifying the crops that you grow so you don't have crop failure for 1 or 2 varieties. We feel like there's a diversification of income that we want to make sure that we keep for the livelihood of ourselves as well as our employees. We're going to stay at 2 part-time employees. That helps us as on risk as well. If one of them were to fall sick, we still have another farmhand. And then today we're actually talking about hiring a 3rd that would be focusing on that infrastructure piece that we continuously need to do, but during COVID we haven't focused on. So we pivoted really quickly. Before I go any further, does anybody have any questions or comments? I'm going to take a sip of water in between that.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks so much for telling your story there. Every person that walks through their story has a moment. I just have been experiencing that for a month now. And thanks for sharing that so that we can all learn. I'm curious, did you say that the reason you're not going to go back to farmers markets is because you're making more money in your online sales and delivery? And if so, what did it take to do that?
Right, I did not, but that's a really good point, and thanks for following back up on that. So there was a couple reasons. We dollar for dollar, as far as what we're making each week, we are making more money now. And then when you take that,
I've heard that hands down.
Yes,
it's crazy.
Thank you. It really is. It really is. So definitely we're, like week for week, we're making more money. And then when you calculate the actual effort, we're definitely making more money because it's not, farmers market is at minimum, some of them are 3 hours, but most of them are 3 to 4 hours long, hour to an hour and a half setup, hour to an hour and a half breakdown, farmers market fees, the additional insurance. When you look at all of that, usually, especially on small farm sizes, a lot of them are breaking even if they're lucky, especially in the first couple of years from it. And I knew that. We got asked to do a farmers market to help increase the farmer count of the farmers market. Farmers markets have to have so many farmers to actually get off the ground, and it was a new one in our area. But when we looked at it, I was like, I'll do it as the owner of the business to help the industry and then also help get our name out there a little bit more. But dollar for dollar, every week I was like, thank goodness there's a whole bunch of great people here, right? Because it's financially, it's not the best choice. And then going to the online store and the delivery, even with delivery, we're making way more money. We've made more money than we've ever made before in the past 6 weeks. And we're in the middle of a pandemic.
So is another correlation to that you're actually paying more attention to the numbers? I mean, given how you're describing this, it seems like you'd pay attention to the numbers.
I would say, for me personally, no. I'm like a data junkie, I was in the military in an operational environment, and then prior to that I did regulatory compliance for biotech and pharmaceuticals. So I'm like a data, like that's what I do. My husband walks by my computer all the time and he's like, I don't even know what all those things are. Stop looking at that. Because it's that's I run our farm by doing our prices are a cost of goods sold based pricing, which is really rare for farms.
Yeah.
So I look a lot at it. The things that I've seen that are the difference is that, and this is, because also too, our customer base has just expanded. We have customers that had never even heard of us before. And the biggest thing that I think the change is, especially here in San Diego, is that people, they wanted local. They were afraid of the food system. They were going to the store and the shelves were empty. They were worried about cross-contamination. And we had a couple of really impactful social media people that put out lists, and the Farm Bureau put out a complete list even of farms that are not members of theirs, which was just insane. I mean, that was amazing for them to do. And people just started reaching out, and all the farms started saying like we would tell people, I'll deliver to you, but there's 3 farms closer to you. So how about if you talk to them first, right? And then if they're sold out, we can, figure it out. But I think it was one of the first times in San Diego history that all the farmers talked to each other and they worked together, but we never really worked together from the model of selling together or sponsoring each other in a way, right? We just didn't do that. Everybody grew what they grew. They were happy with it. They had their subset of customers. And now, one of our auto email replies is, one of the questions I always get asked is, do you deliver to my area or do you have a wait list? So we put up there, here are all the farms. Here's a link to all the farms in the area. See if there's one closer to you. And then if there's not, like, let's have a second conversation. So I think it's the public's, in their perception of food will always be there. And then when it wasn't, that the importance of local.
Thanks. Nicely articulated.
Thank you. Thank you. So based on what we've learned and the other farms that I've talked to, we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of pivoting and how to pivot. So I love this Banksy quote that you think outside the box, collapse the box, and then take a blankety blank sharp knife to it. In the business of farming that we teach at SBDC, one of the things that I kept on pushing to every single farmer in that room is think outside the box. If every single one of us, if we weren't farmers, we would tell these businesses, do it better or different. Well, in the farming community, better is what? A tastier tomato or more yield. Different is potentially how you sell it or how you package it. But if we're all selling at the exact same spots and we're all selling pretty much the same thing because we're in the same region, how are we better or different? And all that became really obvious when the pandemic hit and farmers markets in San Diego got completely shut down because they were miscategorized. So they get completely shut down. And if all the farmers here are taking the exact same approach, which is I'm a new farm, I go to the farmers market, and then I go to the back door of restaurants and knock on the door and try to sell. Restaurants are closed, farmers markets are closed. So it doesn't work. We have to be able to think outside the box. So kind of the 5 steps for any small business: narrow your product offering, find the right price. That doesn't mean find a price that you don't make a profit. It means of this narrow offering, what is that price? Make sure you have the correct packaging on it. Again, that doesn't mean branding and label. That means if you're used to selling cases to a restaurant and now you're selling to the public, they're not going to want they're not going to want 100 pounds of avocado. Develop your tools, digital tools. We need to be able to communicate with people that we can't see or touch or feel or have a conversation with. And you need to be able to promote yourself. So some of the pivots that we've seen are direct to consumer. So if you have a farm that is only used to selling to restaurants, it may be, and Candida, I think you mentioned this, right? So how do we as a community connect better to the farms? How can we help them? Not all farms are going direct to consumer. In fact, one of the standard ways for a new farm to start up, like I said, was go to the back door of restaurants and connect with chefs. Another pivot has been a pickup spot. So they may still continue to sell, but because they don't have the farmers market for people to pick up from them, now they're working with other essential businesses that are open and saying, you can order through me. We've had some that started websites. We've had some that have started stores like us. But some have just said, text me your order. I'm used to getting the orders text to me from chefs. Just text me to order. Here's my Venmo, pay me that way. So it's really using the tools that they have and the resources they have without telling them to create something completely new. Not because it doesn't necessarily need to be created, but more importantly, when we have a time of a pandemic, when people's kind of priority of needs is self first, right? Like, am I safe? Am I okay? Asking them to implement a completely new structure, like a website or an online sales tool, is not the best way to help them pivot quickly and get back on track. So it's really saying, what do you have access to? Can you text? Can you email? Do you have Venmo? Do you have a Square account? By the way, Square has a free online store, which is super easy to set up, right? So it's what do they have and how we can work best with them. In California, fresh produce can be shipped within the state of California with no additional licensing. You just have to label the package. So that's huge. Is anything they're selling, can it be shipped? Is it oranges? Is it avocado? You know, can they ship it safely and the product will arrive in a way that's still beautiful and usable for the end consumer? Some of these farms are creating CSAs when they didn't have them before. So CSA is community supported agriculture. It's usually a mixed box of vegetables provided on a set schedule. Our CSA we had before, we do it on a 3-month, so a quarterly buy-in. You get 6 bags throughout the quarter. We pulled that back, looked at it a little differently, still kept our current CSA customers. We offered a mixed bag weekly for anybody that wasn't sure what was going on, didn't want to commit to it, didn't know financially they could commit to it. Whoops. So we adjusted it and said, we can also do some mixed bags weekly. And then we also created a wait list for it. Another pivot is actually doing delivery. Delivery is a hard logistics to get in place quickly, especially if it's something that you haven't done. If you don't have a delivery vehicle, if you don't have a large enough vehicle to do it, that can keep things cool. But there are tools out there like MapQuest, which is a really old mapping tool that's amazing. And excuse me, I'm going to put you on mute. I'm going to cough a little bit. So we use MapQuest. We can upload the addresses and actually have it tell us the best route. I think when I've gone weeks without talking a lot and talking all day, my throat does not like it. Another pivot we've seen is drive-through farmers markets. So the farmers markets that were closed and couldn't reopen, recently they've been allowed to with new plans. They were saying, how about if we do a mixed box from all the farmers in our market, people prepay, and all they do is drive through and pick up. So I've seen that work and be really great. Pop-ups in front of other essential businesses. Things like grow kits. So if we have farmers that have a bunch of seed and they have soil or they have sprouts, why not just sell that? So you're selling the things that you already have, you're not investing more. And then we've seen farms do online workshops, so they can either they'll do them as pay what you can. And that at least gives additional revenue for them. I think the key thing for all of these pivots is to remember this is not an all-inclusive list. These are just things that people thought up based on the resources that they had available, that they didn't have to buy anything else or set anything else up. And the thing that I've seen across the board that has worked is number 5 on the steps. Promote yourself as a safer option. That's not just fluff. The reality is, if you're getting your food directly from a farmer, you have significantly less hands touching your food than going through the development, the food system. So by saying that, it's an honest, truthful option, and you're connecting with your consumers in your area so they understand that. Has anybody talked to any farmers or even maybe some other businesses that have done a really interesting pivot that they would like to share?
This is Nancy. I am hearing of a lot of like grab and go type ideas, sort of like the box you described for the drive-through farmers market. As the market management, I've been like totally immersed in all the protective measures. So I'm kind of curious, how come San Diego's can't open up if ours can with certain protocols?
So
I have seen the Grow Kit idea too, which I love. And I don't know, I'm going to take your testimonial and your comments about online sales, because everybody is learning how to find what they want online right now. Why wouldn't that also be farmers? And
right.
It just feels like such an extension of their relationship direct with the consumer. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Did you say the farmers markets are open now where you can go on site?
Starting to. So when it closed, the city, so the county, which is who, gives us the permit for them, the county didn't say it. The city of San Diego said it. And a majority of ours are in the city of San Diego. So we had the one-offs that were able to be open, but then there was this blanket statement that came out at the beginning. So everybody closed for like the first 2 weeks. And then then it was San Diego specific. So the other ones started to open, but we were already in it at that point, right? So people were already afraid they weren't coming. So then San Diego, we have a market manager down here, Kat White, that really just did the advocacy work and said they were all categorized in San Diego as temporary events. So the same way you would have like a street fair.
Right.
So they were incorrectly categorized.
Right.
And she really fought it and got it to the first week she could have like 5 farmers there. And now she's back up to 3 blocks. So it's slow but sure, but that kind of goes into this bigger conversation of making sure that the businesses, whether they're farms, farmer market managers, or any business, that they're properly categorized. I won't even say properly licensed, right? But that we're getting the license and getting the category within the essential business that is correct for us. Because things like this happen, and if you're not within the correct category, you fighting for it in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of everything going on, I'm very thankful that she did that for the farmers that are back at the market, because that's key, and for her own business. But I think it kind of speaks to this part that has always been near and dear to my heart, which is the compliance and regulatory compliance part of it, and how much that's important on all businesses, not just, things like pharmaceuticals or government or things like that. Okay. So you heard about me. I got a little teary. Thank you for going through that with me and for my little coughing spell. Let's talk now about the resources that are available. And I'd love to hear from you guys after we go through this on any additional resources that you know about, because I think more and more are coming up daily, definitely. So certainly the ones that we all know about at the federal level, economic injury and disaster loan. The amazing part about this is finally now agriculture can actually apply for this. In the beginning, they could not. Paycheck protection program, we actually took advantage of that and got our funds fairly quickly within about 36 hours of applying, which was fantastic. Pandemic unemployment assistance. This is really key for the farmers that don't have employees. So if my husband and I were the only two working on the farm and we didn't have any income coming in, this would be a great opportunity for farmers to apply for. And then the USDA Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. This may have only about another week to apply for, but this is for any of the farmers that you work with that are the big farmers, right? So we're dealing with big quantities of crops that they can sell directly to the USDA, who will put it out back into the community and into the country. And again, I'll send you all these links after the call so you don't have to try to jot down the acronyms. On the nonprofit and private grant side, there's the Veterans Farmer Coalition. Again, this is specifically for military veteran farmers that are members of the coalition. It's a free membership. You just register, send a copy of your DD-214, and you can get in that, and then you can sign up for the grant. And that, the interesting part about that too is that that's an annual grant. So they're doing it now. They're doing smaller quantities this year to be able to help more people. But annually, they put a $5,000 and a $10,000 grant and also have equipment with that too. So that's a great grant to let your farmers know about. The Verizon LISTIC grant, this was a $10,000 grant that's put out. They're finishing up the decisions on the applications that went out right after the quarantining start. But they're looking at, Verizon is going to do another injection of money. So they're looking at being able to put another grant out there probably about mid-May. So that's one to look at. The Alice grant is another private grant, and they are a lot like SBDC and Cameo. They service business, they provide business advice and business content, and their grant tends to be focused on women and smaller communities, but they're open to anybody. Farmers Legal Action Group grant, Farmers American Farmland Trust grant. I will tell you, American Farmland Trust grant is focusing more on bigger farms with huge losses is really what they're looking at. CAF, so the California Family Farmer Emergency Fund, that's kind of that mid to small farm is who they're looking at. Atera has a continuous running list of funding opportunities. Facebook has some grants, and California Farm League does too. The biggest thing to remember here is that these are ever changing. Not that they're necessarily going away or coming in, but the money, the dollar amounts, the funds are going all the way down to zero. Some of them are getting re-injected with money. Their focus is, you know, continually changing a bit. Farmland, when I spoke to them just to understand the process, one of the things that they talked about was how big your loss is, right? So if you're a smaller farm and you're trying to help smaller farms look at where they're going to do for grants, there's kind of two approaches. You apply for everything and let them tell you no. And then there's also the idea that some of them expect a lot more content and information from you. If they have limited time and resources and kind of focus right now, to really look at the ones that are most likely to they're most likely to get the money from versus kind of all over the board. But you'll have to talk to each farmer and see what's the best approach that they want to take for that. So still talking about resources, kind of moving away from the finances a little bit. Some things to think about related to any of the farms that you talk about, and also any of the consumers that are talking about the safety of their food. There's a ton of information being put out to the farmers by both the counties that they're in. At the very beginning of this, I was getting emails 3 and 4 times a day. I would wake up to have a couple of emails. Now they're down to about 2 a week. But there's a ton of information out there that's free for the farms, talking about what should you be doing for prevention and control. How can you make sure when you're doing this on, you know, doing these deliveries now that you've never done before, how can you do them in a safe way for the food and for you as a person, as the delivery driver? How can you look at changing your food safety protocols across the board? Maybe, you know, you're following FSMA, which is the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is fantastic. But we realized that 1 or 2 changes could actually help across the board if there was ever a potential contamination by having an on-farm stand and things like that. So there's a ton of information out there. Again, I'll send you these links. And it is ever changing. So the prevention controls for farms, that's actually from an education, the Cornell University Farm Education site. So the benefit of that is that one's kind of constantly updating itself. So you'll get all the newest information as it comes out.
I'm Stephanie. There is a couple of questions in the chat. They were just going a little bit back.
Sure.
So they are wondering if you benefit from all that you've listed, like in terms of the some of the federal and state assistance you mentioned before.
Sure. So of these, we applied for the Paycheck Protection Program and we were granted it. We were granted enough for 8 weeks of payroll. So we have to, the requirements for that is that if we use it 100% for our payroll, we can apply to get it forgiven. We did it through our credit card transaction company, which is Square. They reached out to us and told us, based on the amount of transactions that we've had in our history and that we're having right now, that they could be our banker for this. They're working with another bank, but a lot of these, the economic injury too, they were telling you to go back and work with your banker. We don't have a banker. We bootstrapped our whole farm, so we don't have any debt on our farm. We don't really have somebody to go talk to. So it was amazing that Square did that. It was probably a 15-minute application, 2 documents that I uploaded. And like I said, 36 hours later, the money was in my account, and an email describing everything that I had to do to keep track of it to get it forgiven. And they said, don't worry, we will email you the week that you need to apply for a form to fill out, and we'll make sure you get it applied for the forgiveness. So that was amazing to me. Really thankful for that. The related to the nonprofit, we applied for the farmland trust. We were told that we did not have, we didn't have enough income coming in and out and to show enough reduction. The first couple of weeks we did go down and then we went back up, and that makes sense. I mean, I wouldn't want to have that. There's no reason for them to divert money from us when we're talking about 1,000-acre farms that are completely losing everything. We applied for the Alice grant. I haven't heard anything back. We applied for the Verizon grant, and we were told we're a finalist, but I haven't heard anything beyond that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, although we're veterans, we did not apply for the Veterans Coalition grant. That one is always on my to-do list for the bigger picture items, and I always forget. And it's a pretty extensive process of a video and like a letter and stuff. So that went back to my point of like, talk to the people you're helping, because they may not even have the mental bandwidth to try to put that together right now. Any other questions from the comments?
No, that's it.
Great, thank you. So again, on food safety, the key to remember here is that there are some protocols that are changing. You know, in San Diego, we have to wear masks anytime that we leave our house now. That was May 1st. So anytime you're within 6 feet of somebody that you don't quarantine with. So we live on farm. We have 2 employees. We switched our schedules to be Monday through Wednesday, so we could have a period of time of being on farm and doing the work that we need to do without potentially putting people in harm's way. So the days that our employees are here, we communicate via text and via project management tool of everything we need to do. So we're separating ourselves from them, and then they separate themselves greater than 6 feet for a majority of the day, and any activities that need 2 people, they make sure to do full masks and they work together to do it. So there are some changes for farms. not necessarily to push like the regulatory side of it, but just from a safety of everybody involved. The last thing any of us want to do is to get sick and then, you know, you're trying to run your farm and you're down and out with COVID, which I can't imagine anybody wants to do. So specifically in this area, from the financial part, as well as just agribusiness in general, from the financial side, there's the USDA Buy Fresh program. Again, that's really focused towards the bigger farms, or if it was a smaller farm, if they had 1 or 2 crops. There's the IRS Employee Retention Credit. So you're going to get a credit for part of the wages if you can actually retain your employees through this period of time. Temporary paid leave and family leave refund. So if you are, this is a little bit more for the bigger farms, but if you have to pay this, they're giving it as a refund. And then there's also California Farm to Family. So again, these are financial benefits that are strictly for agribusiness, but they're not really grants or loans, right? Like, so they're programs to help you stay financially viable and give you some of that credit back of the money that you spent. On marketing, and this is that piece, Nancy, you were talking about, right? So we've engaged our customer base on online, and most, I won't say all farms, but a lot of farms are really on social media, at least if nothing else, to have their farm information up there. They may have a Facebook account or an Instagram account that maybe they do a little on. This is just a really a great opportunity to utilize that, right? Like, connecting with the people that maybe you were connecting with at every farmer's market day, and now you haven't seen them and you want to check in with them and they want to check in with you on the farm and see what things are going. Great and easy way to do it, and it's free. And then this article that I have that I'll send to you is really talking about crisis communication tips. So the beginning of this, it was really scary. Things are starting to calm down, but there's still this part of us not wanting to lose this customer base that we've had. Right? So now we're gaining this customer that realized the importance of local, and we want to keep them as our customers without being, I'll say doomsday, right? Like, without kind of pushing them in a way that they don't need to be pushed, but just to give them that information. This article is a really great article for that. And then in business management, guidance for businesses and employers. This has been really hard for most businesses, especially when we're talking about now, we're talking about that your employees can leave work because of the quarantine, even if they're not sick. And like, how do you work with that and work with unemployment and work with losing employees, especially if you're a farm that, like, we have very few employees. What you should do as far as bringing people back to work, if you had to lay them off, masks, no masks, temperature checks, all of that. Ag worker health, everything we have to worry about related to ag worker health. The National Center has a lot of really good and consistently updated information about COVID. And then really market farming in a pandemic. So market farming, for those of you that don't know, is kind of the scale that we're at, right? Like, it's basically a garden that you're doing for the sole purpose of selling. So you're still a licensed farm. It's a much smaller scale. You're not doing really big, you know, crops like corn or soybeans where you're doing 100 acres of 1 or 2 crops. So there's some changes in that, a lot of which is based around the fact that most of us live and work on the same property. We're still trying to feed ourselves. We're still trying to feed our employees. And how do we make sure that we do those things and be cognizant of this business that we're trying to keep up and running through this? And then I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the mental health. I think that the mental health across the board right now, all of us need a little bit of a place to de-stress and really recognize that something like a pandemic and quarantining is overwhelming. And then that coupled with the fact that farmers have a very high suicide rate and the stress of farming is very high. These are just a few articles that and resource lists related to stress and farming that I want to make sure all of you guys have access to. Again, they're great for everybody. It's not just like you have to be able to put your hands in the dirt to de-stress. But I think it's just some things to kind of really get the focus back to making sure that if we're not healthy, we can't run a healthy farm and grow healthy food and, you know, have a healthy business and provide for the community. So that, put your own mask on first. And this is definitely a list of resources that will help you do that. So with that, I would love to hear anything else that you guys have as far as resources or questions. My information's down at the bottom. You can certainly reach out if you kind of think I'm the type of person that thinks of something at 2 a.m. and has to jot it down so I can make sure to reach back out to somebody. So I am fine with that too. Emily, is there any other questions in the queue?
Let's see.
Stephanie, I had one more.
Sure.
This is Nancy. What resources did you use to figure out what you should do? Did you just go to the CDC website and the FDA website and figure out how you should manage your farm, or is there somebody who does that for a living?
Yeah. So
or a new profession? Like,
yeah. So
like tracers?
Just so I make sure I answer your question correctly, are you talking about pre-COVID or just like during this issue? Because I think there's
post-COVID, yeah.
Okay, post-COVID. So yeah. So
we're not post yet. So
yes.
Yeah, now.
So the biggest area that was helpful to me is our ag weights and measures department is amazing. We had a new director come in like the year after I started our farm, and she really wanted to engage the community and have that community buy-in, so the business buy-in and hear us. And she did a lot of work with the farm community of all size, you know, really looking at farms from all size and providing them access to resources. So they, from the very beginning, started putting content out there. So that's why I said we were getting sometimes a little overwhelming, but just continuous flow of information, like how to take care of your employees, how to make sure everybody's safe, you know, on the farm, how to, here's a generic sanitation protocol of all your high touch surfaces. Here's how often you should be doing this, and here's how you should be doing that. And then they put out information about free safe serve classes for takeout and delivery. So everybody on our farm did that. We're the only person doing delivery, but we're now packaging, I say like finger quote packaging for delivery, because we're doing so many more CSA bags. I mean, we've gone from, we're a small farm, so we were doing 10 CSA bags every other week to 20 every week right now. So getting just our process in order for that was huge. You know, like, what are we using for packaging? We completely changed our packaging. We had adorable packaging. We had these like really great reusable seagrass baskets that we would take out and then pick up. Well, we can't do that because I'm concerned about where they've been. And then even though I can sanitize them, what if somebody in that house was sick? And I was just really nervous about that. And they were talking about how long it stays on different surfaces. So we transitioned after trial and error and dropping vegetables through bags because they didn't have the weight capacity that we thought. We landed on, like, ours is 2 double bag 50-pound grocery bags, so the paper grocery bags, and then a third over the top. So we can make sure that when we package it, no matter what happens, when I'm walking up from the vehicle to your door, nothing is going to get on it. So it was a lot of ag weights and measures putting information out there, and then us trial and error, and then really the farms in the area powwowing, you know, like, what works for you? What do you do about this? Where can I get hand sanitizer? That's a big thing. I mean, we still struggle with.
I know our distillery locally here is selling it, but they certainly are getting a good price for it.
Yeah, that's ours is too. And the hard part about that is it's such high proof, which is great. but I can't wipe my plastic tables in my package area with it because it makes them sticky because it tears down the plastic. So there's still a lot of things we struggle with. I do a lot of late night searching to see if there's any other place that I can get wipes and things like that. But I think gathering up with the fellow people within your industry and talking, and really whoever your local regulator are. Like I said, the Farm Bureau here has really expanded their reach to all farms, not just the ones that are a member, because it's a membership organization, which has been amazing too. They're a great resource. And then really the resources that I listed, there's a lot of free educational resources, or if they were paid before, like Altera was a paid resource before, and now they're giving away all their educational material for free through this. So I think that it's really just, you know, if somebody tells you a good tip, write it down and pass it along.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. And I hate to cut it short, but I want to note the time. It's 4:09 and we were going to end at 4. So I just wanted to see if there's any final thoughts, and just thank Stepheni so much for sharing your direct experiences. It's been really educational for everyone. So thank you so much. And thanks to all who joined. Are there any last thoughts that anyone would like to share, including Stepheni?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. I think you guys know, I think it's really important that we support our small businesses and our small farms through this time. And thank you for helping get more information out. And I hope all of you that listen today, feel free to reach out to me if you have a question that maybe we didn't cover, but just support small businesses today, always, post-COVID, the new normal. Thank you.
Thanks, Stepheni. And we are recording this, as I mentioned in the beginning, and we'll be sharing this both with attendees today, as well as on the Cameo's website at cameonetwork.org, so that it can be further amplified, the great information here. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much. And we'll look forward to getting the information to you from Stepheni's presentation. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Stepheni.
Bye. Thanks, Emily.
Really
have a good day.
appreciated it. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Good. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.